Have you noticed that progress is generally a good word? It means positive things, unless, of course, you're talking about multiple sclerosis. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of You and Me and Multiple Sclerosis. My name is Pam, and I've been living with multiple sclerosis for 39 years, so I'm starting my 40th year now. And I noticed in looking back over my videos that I put out a video on January 5th of 2021 discussing my symptoms over what was then 35 years. So I was just beginning my 36th year. And have I confused you yet? But anyway, it's been 3 years, and so I thought, well, it's probably time to take stock of where I am. Since I'm in secondary progressive MS, am I actually progressing? So what I'm going to do is play the original video and just interrupt myself a couple of times through just to give you some updates. Let's go ahead. One of the things that I hadn't really done was to go over my symptoms, because remember I've said that my MS is not your MS, and you are likely to be dealing with things differently from me, but it might be helpful for you to know just kind of what I have been dealing with. 35 years is a long time, and I've racked up quite a few different symptoms, not by any means all of them that are possible. But it would be helpful, I think, to just kind of go through them with you. So here we are, my symptoms. Now, I will divide this into two phases. First, when I was first diagnosed with what they call relapsing remitting MS, where you get a symptom and then it goes away and you're pretty much back to normal. My first symptom, and I believe this is true for many people who end up being diagnosed with MS, my first symptom was optic neuritis. And this is inflammation of the optic nerve, the nerve behind your eye. It can be in either eye, and it was for me. First it was in the left eye, and it was accompanied by pain, like I'd pulled a muscle in my eye. And then over time I developed sort of a blind spot in the middle of my field of vision. I was given prednisone, steroids, and eventually it went away. I think it took, I don't know, a month or two for it to totally go away. But over the next 7 years or so, I got optic neuritis again about, I don't know, every year, every 14 months. Sometimes in the right eye, sometimes in the left eye, never in both at the same time, thank goodness. And the last time they were going through a phase in the medical community where they said, well, we don't think steroids are a good thing to use, and so they didn't give me anything. And that took a long time to go away. And because the inflammation was there for so long, the scarring on that one optic nerve is pretty bad compared to the other one. My vision has come back pretty well. I'm not going to complain. But I have lost depth perception because of it. I'm sure that it's affected my general vision to some degree. But at any rate, that's a very common symptom. And if you get that, they usually aren't very quick to tell you you have MS, because it could be other causes. There could be other reasons behind getting it. And I guess that's true for every one of these symptoms. There's no symptom I'm going to mention today that is strictly multiple sclerosis. So the next thing I wanted to tell you about was I had had an MRI pretty early on. I don't know, maybe 2-3 years into having my first symptoms. And the technician had written on the report that the brain shrinkage was greater than is normal for someone my age, and at that time I was in my probably in my late 20s, since I started having MS when I was 25. Well, yeah, that was a little scary. I didn't really think I wanted to lose any volume in my brain. But, the brain, I'm going to say this multiple times probably, but the brain is an amazing organ. and it can accommodate an awful lot of damage. It just finds other ways to accomplish the same thing. So it can take an awful lot before it really shows any problems. But the brain shrinkage being what it was, I was also able to see what they call white spots on the MRI, which are basically, they're just spots where your nerve is inflamed. So there's active attack on the myelin sheath that covers your nerves, and your brain has all these white spots on it because that's where the inflammation is occurring. And those white spots, that's inflammation that, will come and go. If you get different MRIs at different times, you'll see white spots in different places. The ones you had before might have gone away, and you might have new ones. So that was kind of the game. One of the things I should say, too, about both the shrinkage and the spots is that they don't correlate very well with your visible disability. So you might have a terrible looking MRI and feel pretty good, and you might have an MRI that doesn't seem to be all that bad, and you may be having terrible symptoms, terrible fatigue, terrible muscle problems. You might be spastic. You might have a lot of things going wrong, but your brain scan doesn't really show that you're particularly dire. Well, here's another one, balance, and this is not too surprising. Another very common symptom of multiple sclerosis is difficulty with balance, and I first started to notice this in my late 20s. I was on hikes at that time, and there were times you were supposed to cross over a stream on a log and stuff, carrying a heavy pack. That became very frightening, very problematic, because I didn't trust anymore that I was going to be able to balance. And I tend to overcorrect. It's another symptom of MS, really, is this tendency toward overcorrection of what you do. Like if you reach out your hand and it touches something hot, you pull back with a lot more violence than a normal person would. Your reflexes are exaggerated, all kinds of stuff. But that's really kind of what's going on. You're losing your, well, the technical term is proprioception. There you go. There's your 25-cent word for the day. But proprioception just basically means your sense of yourself in space. So do you know if you're standing up straight? Do you know if you're upside down even? Do you really even know? And in the dark, I'm lost. So that's all part of the balance thing. And that all started early on. And as with most MS symptoms, I have good days and bad days, relatively speaking. There are some days I don't trust my balance at all. There are other days I can navigate around pretty well. It all depends, and who knows, right? I have no idea why. I just haven't found any way to predict it or to influence it by what I eat or what I do or don't do. Well, okay, fatigue I've talked about. That is so common with MS. And remember, I talked about the two kinds of fatigue mainly that MS folks deal with. And the first is the fatigue of disability that just takes more energy to do the most simple things when you have a chronic illness. And the other one is what they call nerve fiber fatigue, where your nerve fibers just have had enough and they just shut down. It's like if you had a dead battery in your car. It's not going to go. You can sweet talk it all you want to. It's not going to go. It's a physical thing. So there's no way to overcome it. It just is what it is, and rest is the only thing you can do to get past that. But the fatigue that I had in my early years was not bad at all. It has come to be more of a problem as time has gone on, but I had a really, really bad bout of it about 10 years ago, and I haven't had anything that severe since. But I really have to watch the nerve fiber fatigue. I do not undertake to do anything that will take me too far from home, and then there's no way to get back home again because I won't make it. Another one, the loss of fine motor skills. It's really kind of sad, but I can't manipulate things with my fingers like I used to be able to do, which includes everything from typing, trying to play the piano, threading a needle, buttoning a shirt. It doesn't matter. I really don't have good fine motor skills, and I have to be very mindful of what time in the day I'm going to take on certain tasks. I might realize that, well, if I'm going to do something like dishes, that trashes my fine motor skills. After I've been moving heavy pots and pans around and all that stuff, don't ask me to try and write something legible. It just is not going to happen. So if I need to write things, I do them in the morning before I do much else, because I need to make sure that I have every parcel of fine motor skills that I can possibly grab onto. And I'll add in, I forgot that I had lost my sense of taste, and that things tasted like metal or even like blood. The only thing that tasted good to me was potato pancakes and applesauce, so I lived on that for quite some time before it finally resolved itself, and I haven't had it since. Well, and I also really didn't talk about numbness as much as I might have, because I think I was already dealing with it even in my relapsing phase of MS. But the thing about that was that it was sort of coming and going. Like most of my symptoms, it was like trying to tune into a very weak radio station. It would come and it would go, and it would come and it would go. And I think that is maybe what relapsing MS is all about. But now numbness is just kind of permanent in my fingers only. And it used to be more in my toes as well, but I think I don't have that anymore. It's just decided it likes my fingers better. So much for my career as a concert flautist, right? Good thing I didn't want to be one, because I certainly wouldn't have been able to do that now. But overall, it's not a terrible numbness. I can still distinguish gross sensations. I just don't really have a good sense of the finer sensations. So a lot of the pleasure that people would get from tactile sensation is just kind of lost on me now. But it's not in any way painful. At some point they decided, the medical community, my doctors, decided that I had transitioned from relapsing remitting to secondary progressive MS. And this is kind of the no man's land, because really no two people with SPMS look the same, act the same, feel the same, have the same symptoms. It's really, really strange. And it doesn't have to be radically different from what you already had. It's just you're no longer returning to quote unquote normal. You're between symptoms. Your symptoms kind of are always there. And that's really maybe the only way they can say for sure that you have SPMS, is that your symptoms just really never totally go away. Or not all of them. I shouldn't say none of them go away, but some of them just kind of hang around, and that's what you live with. Another way that they decide that you must be in SPMS is that your white holes in your brain on the scan that you do for your MRI are now black holes. That means, and this is very sad, that means that the nerve is just gone. It's been destroyed. It's eaten away and it's gone. And my brain has quite a few of these little guys. It's really alarming to look at, actually. I'm surprised that I'm still able to do everything I can do with all of those little holes in my brain. I look like sponge. But, like I said, the brain is an amazing organ. So I've been able to do pretty well, as I'll mention here in a minute. But the black holes are there, and this is not reversible. The other thing I wanted to talk about, and I don't know if other people have this problem, but I've noticed that with my advancing MS, I have a limited filter. So, your frontal cortex not only does executive functioning, but it does sort of emotional intelligence kinds of things, right? It keeps you from expressing temper tantrum, rage, or getting overly emotional about stuff. And I've never been a crier, so that's not changed much. But I will tell you, when I get frustrated, I just have these little micro rages now that I never used to have. I mean, I used to inside know that I was frustrated, maybe even angry, but I could keep that under control. I could mask that. Nobody would know. Well, that's not so true anymore. Unfortunately, thanks to the advancing multiple sclerosis, I just really am not a pleasant person to be around sometimes. Now, my anger is usually directed at inanimate objects. Technology is not my friend. Gravity is not my friend. And of course, I told you before, with this my fine motor skills, a lot of times I drop things, or I am totally incapable of doing some action that I want to do. Oh, those things just frustrate me. And I have not thrown anything, broken anything intentionally yet, but I am concerned. I mean, of all my symptoms, this one bothers me because I feel like my brain is no longer my friend, and that's scary. I've lived with this brain for 61 years, and I really don't want it to turn on me now. So that's just something that might be a fairly rare symptom of MS, but I'm going to say it's not one that I like. Okay, now I just wanted to list a few corollary symptoms of, I'm going to call them corollary symptoms of MS. They are not, and I repeat, not indicative of MS. They are not unique to MS in any way, but because MS is a neurological disorder, you have to assume that anything that you get that's neurological in nature is related in some way to MS. Well, I get restless leg. I take gabapentin for that because that's really annoying. I don't think it's really severe, but it keeps you from falling asleep. It's not much fun, so I don't like it. Anyway, that's one that I've had. Another one that I got was shingles. I had this once some years ago, and it was fortunately not incredibly painful, which I hear it can be, but that was a neurological thing. I just assumed that it must have had something to do with MS. And the next one, again, is something people get, plantar fasciitis, which is the one where the bottoms of your feet hurt when you put weight on them. And this one, thankfully, didn't last very long. I was able to take care of it, I think, with some magnesium supplements, and that seemed to make it go away. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but I stayed with magnesium after that. I figured it's got to be helping. The final one I wanted to talk about was trigeminal neuralgia, which is the worst symptom anyone can get for anything. I don't know, maybe you've not even heard of it. You have, in your face, you have two major trigeminal nerves. They go down the sides of your face. There's a branch on your forehead, there's a branch under your eyes, and there's a branch in your lower jaw on either side. And your nerves can just kind of go into a jangle. It doesn't even have to have anything to do with anything. But believe you me, that is the worst pain I have ever felt in my life. I was sound asleep the first time I had this happen to me, and I was woken up out of a sound sleep. It was like someone had just shot 6 million volts through one of my teeth in my lower jaw, and I just about jumped through the ceiling out of bed, looked in my mouth. There didn't seem to be anything wrong. I went to the dentist, and of course the attack, once it started, kept going. Who knows, it wasn't a regular thing, but I never knew when another one would hit me. But I got into the dentist as soon as I could, and he couldn't find anything. He took x-rays, he did everything. He couldn't find a thing. Well, it was hurting so badly. I ended up in the emergency room. I didn't know what to do. And thankfully, the doctor there knew what trigeminal neuralgia was, and he immediately diagnosed it and sent me home with the right medication for it, which turns out to be the prescription, the brand name is Tegretol, which is used for seizures. It's an anti-epileptic. The chemical name for it is carbamazepine, and that's mainly what I'm on now when I need it. Thankfully, I don't often need it. But I will tell you one thing that's changed is when I go to the dentist, if he needs to work on a back molar, and normally what they would do then is they take the needle with the Novocaine in it and stick it in the hinge of your jaw to numb you. And I told him, sorry, no, we're not doing that. You're going to have to find some other way to get me numb, because you're not putting a needle down by that nerve. I went through that once with the dentist, and it was terrible. The after effects were dreadful. So yes, he found a way to numb me by doing kind of a local numbing around the tooth and all that kind of stuff. I won't go into detail because dental work is not everybody's cup of tea, so forget it. But it was a much better thing. And here is another symptom I didn't mention the first time, and I actually forgot to mention it this next time through, except I was on the phone talking with a friend of mine just the other day who has MS, and she started talking about her symptoms, and I realized, oh my goodness, it's the same exact thing. In fact, she even used the same word I've been using, peristalsis, and that is your 25-cent word for the day. What it means is that your intestines just don't move the food along in your system, which of course leads to bowel problems. And this all started for me way back when I had my first attack of trigeminal neuralgia, which I've talked about. When I went to the emergency room, they sent me home with different medications to treat the pain. And the right one, thank goodness, was one of them. But one that they sent me home with, and I was on for a few days, was oxycodone. And believe you me, I got off that one just as fast as I could, because before then, I had been what everybody refers to as regular. After that, I had the worst constipation of my life, and once I got off of it, it did not resolve. Fast forward 20 years later, it is still a problem. And I have tried all the over-the-counter things that I could think of. I've talked to my neurologists, and they usually look at me with total blank stares because they just don't even have a clue about what to do about it. I finally got some decent advice from my primary care doctor when she just basically said, well, try them in combination. That's probably the best thing you can do, and just see what works for you. And over time, I finally did figure out, and it's been about 6 months now, after 20 years, I finally found something. Phillips Milk of Magnesia, and of course this is not sponsored, and it might not work any better for you than any of the other things out there. I take 2/3 of the little plastic cup that they put on top of it, about 2/3 full of that every night before I go to bed. And in the morning, things are okay in the sense that compared to being constipated for 20 years, it's great. Now, it will go the other way, so be aware of that. But, incontinence has never been my problem. That's how little peristalsis is going on. It just makes life livable again, which before it just, no wonder I was in a grumpy mood. Because living like that for 20 years, it would probably put most people in a bad mood. And one thing I forgot to say the first time through this video, because it's been something that I've dealt with long before I even knew I had MS, and I think it does have something to do with MS, but I'm not sure what, is that I do not regulate my temperature very well. I can go from being uncomfortably cold to uncomfortably hot in the shortest time imaginable. So if I go from an air-conditioned store, for example, that is so cold I'm freezing, but I walk out into the 100-degree sunshine, within, I don't know, 5-10 seconds, I'm dying of heat prostration. So, that's always been something that I've dealt with, and I'm going to attribute it to multiple sclerosis. So I think I'll just call it a corollary symptom for now. But I just wanted to talk quickly about what things I can still do, because this was a laundry list of stuff that's really kind of, or could be, damaging to the quality of your life. But I want to make it very clear that I still enjoy life very much. I mentioned before I can still walk short distances, certainly all around the house. I don't need a cane. I don't need any assistive device to walk around my house. Or even very short distances, I can go, I don't know, half a block or whatever without anything. If I walk longer than that, I want a cane with me, but I don't even like to walk for much more than maybe a quarter of a mile to a half of a mile. And then when I get that nerve fiber fatigue, no, you're stuck. You're out there in the middle of wherever and you can't do anything because your nerves are shot. But I can still do that. I can still think. Now, this is interesting, especially when I told you that my brain has shrunk. It's full of black holes. It looks pretty sad, actually, when you see the MRIs. But I not only am taking a degree program, which is quite challenging. It's a master's program, so it's quite challenging, and I'm doing very well. I have written a novel, and I'm beginning to work on another one. I can still think, I can still do all those executive functions. I just can't be, I'm much more easily distracted, let's put it that way, but I can still do everything I used to do. And then finally, I can be a friend. That hasn't changed. I still enjoy friendships, and I still enjoy my family. I have my dog. Life is still pretty good, and I don't have any complaints about that. I'm grateful for what I have, and I guess that's maybe the summary here of the whole thing, is that I am very grateful that I still have all the abilities that I do have. And one thing that MS will do for you is teach you gratitude, teach you to appreciate and treasure the things that you have in your life that still matter to you, that you can still enjoy. And the people who care, the people who really will do all kinds of things for you and not consider it a burden at all. My friends, if there's some event or something, and this was of course back before COVID, but if we were getting together for something, lunch or any other kind of event, I wouldn't even have to ask them for a ride. They would just say, can I pick you up? Or, you want a ride? Because, by the way, I gave up driving. Voluntarily, by the way. I never was told by a doctor that I couldn't drive, but I just chose to give it up because with everything going on with me, I just thought, I'm probably an accident waiting to happen, so forget that. But it doesn't matter because my friends, my husband, people will just drive me places, and there isn't any feeling that, it's a burden to them or I'm beholden or whatever. And so, this is a thing to be incredibly grateful for, which I am. Well, looking at all of these as a collection, I think for one thing, I did a pretty good job back then of enumerating all of my symptoms. And as I compare the me of those days with the me of today, I have to say, I don't really feel like I've done a lot of progressing. I feel like I'm pretty much on, maybe a very slight amount of progressing. Nothing noteworthy. Nothing that would send me running to the doctor, that's for sure. But I do want to talk a little bit about what I said at the end there about friendship and how important it is to still be a friend. Part of the reason that it's hard to know whether I'm progressing, but but my suspicion is that I'm not. Ever since late April, our lives have been pretty upside down and turned around because a friend of ours, her husband passed away, at the end of April, and ever since then, we've been spending a lot of time at her place, helping her get out from under the mountain of things that she's got to figure out and take care of. And I don't see that there's going to be any end to it, which means that I'm on a different eating schedule. I'm not eating the same things that I'm used to eating. I'm not really on the same sleep schedule. A lot of things are kind of disrupted for me. And fatigue, of course, is always lurking at the door, waiting to pounce. But I will say I have been very impressed that it's been kept in check. I've really been able to do pretty much what I've needed to do without collapsing in a pile, which was my fear at first, honestly. I wasn't really sure I was going to be able to handle this because our friend lives 2.5 hours away if you drive straight there, but we usually don't drive straight there because we stop at the grocery store about halfway there. We pick up things that she needs. When we get there, there's usually laundry to do and dishes to do and some light housekeeping to do and sheets to change and clothes to hang up and trash to take out and cacti to water and all kinds of things. And I will say my husband does the harder of those tasks, the more physically demanding of those tasks, but I do my part. And I was sure that it was going to really take a toll on me. And I don't know that it has. I think my symptoms are holding pretty steady. So all that by way of saying I am just grateful that it's hanging in there for now. Maybe when it's all over, I'll collapse for weeks. I don't know. But for right now, things are okay. And I do want to say, just at the end of all this, now I've had MS for 39 years. I don't know where you are in your MS journey. You may be just starting. You may have had MS for years and years. You might even have had MS for longer than me. And no two people have MS the same way. I said that at the beginning. I said that 3 years ago, and I'll say it again. Your MS is not my MS. And so while I know that I've lost capabilities, I've lost stamina, I've lost some of the zest I had for doing things, I feel like I'm pretty stable and I'm doing pretty well. And if your situation is different from mine, if you're feeling progression is happening like you're on a conveyor belt and it's moving along, herky and jerky or fast and smooth, however it's going, you may be further down the journey than me. And I hope that my story does not cause you to feel dismay or even a little bit of resentment, because I wouldn't blame you if it did. But I hope that if you're at the beginning of your journey and you're looking at the uncertain future, you can take some comfort in the fact that for many of us, because I don't think I'm alone, I think there are many people with MS who do pretty well and progress very slowly, almost imperceptibly over time. I'm hoping that that will encourage you. But it is important, as I've said in so many of my videos, to maintain your general health at as high a level as you possibly can. Eat well, sleep well, take care of yourself. Don't smoke, don't abuse your body, don't do things that you know your body doesn't want you to do. Because I do think that that makes a difference in progression, in the rate of progression. And I don't want to see anybody do that if they can avoid it. So I hope that you found this interesting. I hope that you didn't mind that I repeated it, because perhaps many of you haven't seen it. But I would really welcome your comments on it. How does it compare with where you're at? Are you in progressive MS? How long have you been living with multiple sclerosis? How long since your diagnosis? And what kinds of things might you be dealing with that I haven't dealt with? Because as you probably saw, I haven't experienced some of the symptoms that many people get when they have MS, like the famous MS hug or spasticity. Those things have never bothered me, at least not so far. But share what your experience has been, because I think all of us would find that very interesting. Well, I'm going to end this for now, and until my next video, I just ask you to please take really good care of yourself, and I'll see you again soon.